So today we are here at Enchanted Blade Gaming in Denison, Ohio. We are doing an interview post our sealed event today. We did a Welcome to Rathe sealed in expectation for the upcoming Farewell to Rathe draft. We just kind of wanted to see more cards, what our packs are going to look like, what we could expect going forward. And we're here with the winner today, which is my little brother Logan. And we will be discussing how he felt about his deck, A, B, how the actual event went, what do you think really clinched the win for him today. So to get started, we already mentioned we did a sealed event today, and we just have some questions. What primary things were you worried about, as far as matchups go with your choice of playing Dorinthia today?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when you're playing Dorinthia is you really want to take advantage of the lack of defense reactions that your opponent's going to have in the matchups. When you're playing in Constructed, it's much harder to play around, but when you're playing in a limited pool like this, if you have powerful attacks, you can really take advantage of your attack reactions, which are pretty deep in her card pool that your opponents don't necessarily have access to. So there were very heavy pivot turns where some of the cool cards I got were like Steelblade Supremacy, which threatens to draw a card, and if I'm holding onto an attack reaction and they just block me, 1-to-1, so I swing for 5 and they block for 5, and I'm holding onto a reaction, I know I pretty much have it in the bag that I'm going to hit a draw trigger here because there aren't a plentiful number of defense reactions, and the ones that are in Welcome to Rathe that your opponents are likely to get, besides Red Sink Below, they're not going to block very efficiently, and they're also going to cost something to use them. So even if my opponent ends up pitching a card to play a defense reaction, I still feel like I come out ahead. Unless I'm losing Dawnblade counters or something like that, it didn't feel very bad to end up swinging in them to defense react, especially because if they react to you, you don't even have to commit your own attack reactions. You can just sort of hold on to those and wait for a better opportunity if they are like over blocking for a lot.
Absolutely. As a primarily Dorinthia player for a very long time, Steelblade Supremacy is obviously one of our favorites, and I believe that you're completely correct in saying that it's very easy to set up in a sealed environment for the simple fact of, A, it's going to be buffing you for 2. While you don't have as much ways to go again easily with her, in the sealed environment, it does just the general +2 and then the hit trigger for draw a card is going to force them to probably block you out a lot more, specifically because it could just give you more attack reactions on your follow-up attack if you can set that up with a Warrior's Valor or your Refraction Bolters. I see also here that he has a route. He did manage to pull a route in his seal pool today. You want to tell us, did you win any games specifically because of the route today?
The route, there was a game, I never got the kill, the winning blow off of route, but there was a game where I played it in order to keep a counter on Duskblade that I got, or on Dawnblade, sorry, from the previous turn. So the route, obviously the power of it it's so good. The real problem with it is if you don't have go again, it doesn't landing a swing is great because you deal damage to your opponent generally, but you don't always have the ability to swing again with Dorinthia. And I had Refraction Bolters, but most of the time I would have used them in a previous situation to try and pull off the Steelblade Supremacy turn or to try and get more value from that. But the time I used Route to save a Dawnblade counter, I think, was what kept tempo for me and how I ended up winning that matchup.
Absolutely. I see here that you also managed to pull an Enlightened Strike.
Yeah.
Dorinthia doesn't use a lot of attacks in her own sort of, actual constructed pool. How did you feel here? Obviously, you got a lot of generic attacks in a sealed or draft setting. Did Enlightened Strike end up winning you any games or setting you ahead anywhere?
Yeah, Enlightened Strike's definitely a card. I mean, if you pull it in a pack in a draft, that's absolutely the card you want to take. I think it's exceptional in every single deck. In Dorinthia, it might honestly be at its weakest simply because it kind of leans on having additional action points. And unless you lead with the Enlightened Strike, it can't always get its full value because you don't necessarily always want to choose the go again option. Generally, I think trying to swing for 7 or to draw a card from it is better. But obviously, with the limited amount of go again Dorinthia has, it's pretty solid. What I ran into was a lot of the time I would have the Enlightened Strike in my hand, and the cards I had in my hand otherwise were all attack reactions that could only target my weapons. So I was in a position where it didn't make sense to even play the Enlightened Strike because it's basically leaving the other 3 cards in my hand dead, and you do have to bottom a card when you play it. So in my first 2 games, I ended up pitching the Enlightened Strike, and we never got back around to it. In my third game, however, I actually did get a lot of use out of Enlightened Strike. I played it for 7 with a Razor Reflex, and that is where
absolutely.
Enlightened Strike with Razor Reflex interaction is incredible because you can give it go again anyway. I didn't even care if they blocked. It was coming in for 9. Them blocking 9, I didn't care if it hit or not. I just wanted to go again on the Razor Reflex. And then I swung the Dawnblade for, I think it was a total of 16 damage that came out.
And sealed is amazing.
Yeah, it's impossible to block that much unless you have like an unmovable arsenal or something.
Multiple unmovables in your entire turn, sure.
Yeah.
So with all of this, obviously you got today's win. Our winning lately has been for the promo card Vault of Bright Egg, so congratulations on getting one of those today. That's once again courtesy of Enchanted Blade Gaming here in Denison, Ohio. Just a couple more questions here. Did you have any wins today that you felt were upset wins? Somewhere where you were behind part of the game and then you kind of came out of nowhere and wound up clinching the win.
Dorinthia is definitely a little bit swingy, so like if you start to build Dawnblade stacks and you keep them, you can really just push pressure and win the game that way. I was never really in a position where I thought that like I absolutely had it or I was absolutely done for, and then I managed to pull out a win. There was one turn that I set up that was quite powerful, largely based off the equipment slots that you can get in the Welcome to Rathe equipment pool. I managed to have 3 Iron Rot pieces, and my brother here was the recipient of this play.
Yeah.
He set up a Crippling Crush, which in Limited a lot of the times is going to be just an absolutely devastating attack. He dominated a Crippling Crush with a Goliath Gauntlet on top of it, so it was a 13 dominated Crippling Crush, which a lot of the times is going to end up just washing out the game. But I had set up the red Sink Below that I pulled in my arsenal, and I had been sitting on it and waiting for an opportunity for one of these powerful dominated crush attacks because I knew something was going to come down the line. And the great thing is when you arsenal a defense reaction, even if something is dominated, you can still play and defend with that defense reaction. So on the turn where he sent Crippling Crush for 13, I threw down a 3 block, which a lot of Dory's warrior cards just block for 3. My 3 pieces of equipment for 6 total, and then Sink Below red brings me to a total of 10, which avoids the crush effect from the Crippling Crush. So I ended up saving a 3-card hand, which in most other circumstances that probably would have ended up losing me the game outright at that point.
Yeah, it was very early in the game, but it did cause me to essentially lose all tempo because it was my only
and you had
bomb.
Set up, and the amount it takes to set up for that Crippling Crush turn means that the Bravo invested a lot in it. So to shut that down, it put me in a good position to win the game.
And I will say that all of my other games were wins because of the Crippling Crush, absolutely.
Yeah. So the power of that card cannot be understated.
Yeah, absolutely. With all of that being said here, how do you feel about, Welcome to Rathe Sealed or draft in general? Do you think that, you played the most powerful hero? Do you think that typically, maybe Katsu tends to pull forward? Or just with the pool that we saw today, who do you think really had the best deck? And if it was you, was it because of your Steel Blade Supremacy, your route? Do you think that really clinched it for you today?
I would say, generally, I don't feel like Dorinthia is the strongest hero in Limited. I think she's quite good, especially because her weapon is the most efficient weapon in the set.
And I think, saying that, I think that because she doesn't have a lot of ways in Welcome to Rathe alone, to get that go again, that probably sets her behind in comparison to, an actual constructed format where you're kind of trying to make sure you swing twice a turn if you can, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the action point situation in Dorinthia is what complicates her. And I, thankfully, at the last minute before we started, I took a time snap potion that I had pulled, and I was like, I think I'll include this. I don't know if I'm going to get use out of it. And I was a little weary just because the items don't have any block value. And the thing I love most about Dorinthia is that all of her warrior cards all block for 3. So it didn't feel great to have a no block, but I did end up landing time snap on the board and setting up a Steel Blade Supremacy turn where even after my refraction boulders were gone, I still had 2 action points, so I could swing twice after forcing the first one to hit with a reaction, and making sure that I got to draw twice off of Steel Blade Supremacy. But what I would say is the main reason I chose Dorinthia is because I hit a Route and a Steel Blade Supremacy, which are both incredible Majestic and S rarity cards that really just when I opened my first pack, I actually had both of those in one pack, and I was like, this is probably going to be a Dorinthia pool right here.
Sure.
Just the power level that those two cards present in a deck of 30 cards is pretty substantial, and I was never disappointed playing either of them.
Absolutely. Do you have any other comments about today's tournament? Anything else stand out for you in any games? Maybe even something else you heard at the shop today? I don't think any of my games were necessarily upsets or anything too crazy.
The one thing I would point out, and I going into this, I had read a bit about the draft format, and I've played it a few times. I just want to mention the card Wounding Blow. It is like an absolute standout generic. It is it blocks for 3 damage, or it blocks for 3. The red version does 4 damage, and it plays for 0. So, worst case scenario, if you're blocking out with your whole hand, you can still just send 4 damage at your opponent with just 1 card from hand, or you can set up an arsenal maybe to try and, if you have some go again or stuff like that. But I just think it's an absolutely great generic card, and as we were discussing our card pools, I seem to be the only one that had sort of clued into the value there. And I only had one that I had pulled, unfortunately, but I think they're great because, again, it's a generic that blocks for 3, and that's not super common, especially not in this set.
Yeah, absolutely. Very few generics in Welcome to Rathe. Actually, nothing else really springs to mind.
Yeah, I mean, Lightning Strike, obviously it does, but in the common rarity, I honestly can't think of any off the top of my head.
Right, and that's given that defense reactions were so limited here, and Unmovable is such a costly card. Having those three defense cards in decks that don't necessarily have as much 3 defense, which I suppose in Welcome to Rathe, all of the decks kind of have a lot of 3 block
class cards.
Class cards for themselves. But just given that extra one to let's say a pool that you didn't have a lot of extra cards for. For example, I only had maybe 8 or 9 ninja cards total. It would have been very difficult for me to play ninja and block efficiently to pull off any sort of strategy there. Otherwise, myself for the event, I felt good about my deck. Obviously, our matchup was game 1, round 1, and did not apparently go for me, or this interview be a little different. But otherwise, I think the actual sealed pool, the actual sealed event here for Welcome to Rathe, I think that this was developed for years before this went to market realistically, and this was play tested and play tested and play tested before it actually made it to anybody. And we saw Alpha was a playable set for a long time before the game actually went public.
Yeah, I think the important thing to note is a lot of people that we play with in our area and in this card shop specifically, they all started playing in 2021. So,
right. None of us had even played any of this when it was current.
I started during the Tales of Aria pre-release, and everyone else here only started a month or 2 before that. So
I started the week that Monarch went into Unlimited.
Right. So most of us don't have any experience having drafted Welcome to Rathe that a lot of people have been doing for years. So it's great to get into the format because it's definitely a set that they put a lot of care into. And I like it because it doesn't ever feel like you have a deck that's unplayable, which sometimes in other formats the drafts can end up in such a way where your deck just doesn't feel completed.
Or you end up having to use a lot of bobbles, and no one wants to do that. Let's be honest. But thank you very much for the interview today. We might have other questions or concerns. We're happy to talk about that in our comments. Anything that we can answer for you, any questions that you may have for us, any questions that you may have for the shop. Our shop owner here is Tyler Kirch at Enchanted Blade Gaming. He'd be happy to jump in and answer any questions about that as well. In fact, you'll probably be seeing a lot more of him on the channel soon. And we're very happy to have a local game store that supports us in such a way. In fact, we're filming in his shop right now, and he's been very adamant with making sure that we're able to do that. So just a big thanks to him, big thanks to Logan here for doing our interview with us today. And otherwise, I hope everybody has a great rest of the day, and we'll be seeing you soon.